Michelle, thank you so much for being on the show with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks so much for asking me.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I like to do on here on Hey Docs is to just have everybody tell us a little bit about how they got into the orthodontic field. So maybe you can talk to us about your journey of coming on to Level Up Orthodontics, working with Dr. Gage, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Honestly, my journey of ending up with Dr. Gage was purely by chance. I had been a stay-at-home mom for about 12 years, and I lived in North Dakota and moved down here and ended up going to work just to get back into the workforce. I went to work at Starbucks and I was, oh, I'll do that. And then I was a writer. I was a content writer and editor. And then I was like homeschooling my kids. And so I was just doing a little bit of everything.
Yes.
I was nannying my newborn granddaughter. And so I was just doing a bunch of things. But then and I've always had been in the medical field. So I was a financial counselor for like 15 years. And so I thought, I'll just go back into the medical field. And so I did that. And I just really hated the job. So I'd been there for 6 months and I applied for a bunch of jobs, and Dr. Gage called me and asked for an interview, and I interviewed with him, and then I interviewed with Rachel, and he's like, you worked at Starbucks, you must be in for an adventure. So yeah, here I am.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, welcome to the industry. I know we've been working together for a while, and I love it because a lot of times I'll tell my docs, like when we get started, a lot of times our first employee may not be our forever employee, but when we do find those right ones that fit, it's really pretty magical. And I know for Dr. Gage, you are one of those unicorns out there that I think you found your niche within our orthodontic industry.
I do love it. Yes, absolutely. It has been very fun for me and everything that I've looked for in a career.
Yeah, that's great.
So Michelle, I love your story about Starbucks. I love how, if I remember right, was it with you that he came into Starbucks specifically looking for kind of a team member because he knew that the baristas had the personality type that he was looking for?
It was, yes. Yeah.
That's actually a really fun story. So I think one of the things that a lot of our startup docs get really hesitant about is hiring somebody not without orthodontic experience, right? So outside of our industry. Sure. And I think it would be cool for you to touch a little bit on what skill set do you think, even let's start as a barista, right? What skill set as a barista helped you in becoming what you are today, which is the office manager for the practice?
And just in hiring people and what helps me in my position and as a TC and as an office manager is just being personable. And as a barista or as working at Starbucks, you have to not only be personable, but you have to be able to have good communication skills with everybody. You have to be able to do a lot of different things at different times. You have to be flexible. You have to be a hard, dedicated worker. Making those drinks, a lot of people don't realize what goes into and the amount of training that goes into it. I'll be honest, working here is a lot easier than working at Starbucks. I mean, Starbucks was hard. I love taking orders and visiting with people, but to be honest, the actual making of the drinks, that's a lot of work. There's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure, right? So it is a very high pressure job. And so that's one of the things I love about Dr. Gage, like how he visions an employee is he sees somebody that has perseverance. So like when we hire even younger people, did they stay in a sport for several years? That shows that they were willing to complete something. So maybe they don't have any ortho experience, but they do have perseverance. And that's a skill that we can draw on. We can teach them how to ortho skills, but we can't teach somebody good customer service skills. We can't teach somebody how to come to work on time or how to not call out sick. But we can teach them a lot of those skills that teaches them the ortho industry. So that's one of the things that we look at. So
absolutely. And how long, and this is more speaking to the doctors again that are in that space of maybe hiring and looking for an employee and are nervous about it. But how long do you feel like it took you to be able to be comfortable in that role? Like I know the part of customer service or presenting fees, or presenting treatment, I feel like right away you were never shy, right? You stepped right into it, like, I'm just going to do it. But I remember watching you and seeing that switch when you finally were like, I get it. And I really don't feel like it was that long of a period of time. Kind of take us through that journey for you. What did that look like for you?
I think you're correct. Like, I came from an industry that I was the financial counselor for a major medical hospital, that I saw every self-pay patient that came in, and I was asking for $300,000. Will that be cash or charge? So
Mm.
for me, asking for money was maybe not the most challenging thing to do in my job here. And talking to people is also not a challenging thing for me to do. The actual like learning of the orthodontic piece was where I had to learn and grow. But Dr. Gage and I had a lot of the first few months that we were in business, we literally had 0 patients. Like, we didn't even have walls. So like for the first month that I was here, we just didn't have all the walls up. And so then the first month we were in business, we had 4 patients the entire month. So we had lots and lots of time to train me and read books. And I guess I have a lot of dedication. So it did take a lot of time. I think when I really started clicking was when we really started seeing patients.
Yes.
So it was that kind of repetition of, like, I'm a visual kind of kinesthetic learner. So it was really hard for me to imagine what it was supposed to look like until I actually could envision it and actually live it out. And so once we started having patients coming in on a regular basis, and so for us, that was really started hitting in about January, February, and we opened like in October. So like January, February, we started getting a little bit more consistency of patients. And then I started feeling like, hey, I do understand what Rachel was saying. This makes a little bit more sense of how this is supposed to look. But when you're like sitting there for a full 8-hour shift and we've got 1 patient coming in and you're like going, okay, we're going to do this. And then we're like, they come in and you're like, wait, we don't know how to take money. What do we have a payment system? What are we doing to make payments? We don't even know what to do. Like, you just, those are the kind of funny stories that we laugh at now. Dr. Gage and I are like, yeah, remember we just had to take QuickBooks. Dr. Gage is like, I have QuickBooks. Let's do that. We're like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So you do have to have a sense of humor with yourself and just go with the flow. So that's fun. But
so I think let's take it back a little bit, because I think one of the key things that you said there was that you and Dr. Gage worked together in those months prior to getting you ready to see those patients. And I think that is that key piece, right? It's that you had somebody who was familiar with the industry. You had us as consultants, right? And you had these pieces that as you stepped into this role that kind of helped, I guess the word would be like marry everything together, right? And role play. So did you and Dr. Gage do any role play prior to doors opening? Did you talk through his treatment plans? What did those months look like prior to stepping into actual patients as far as your training process goes?
Of course, I met with you. I met with Rachel because Rachel helped train me on just everything there was to do with ortho. And then she also helped train then Dr. Gage and I. So like Dr. Gage would always tell me that his goal for me was to read his mind. Now, I always laughed at that because I was like, oh, yeah, you're funny. But now I realize now 3 years later, oh, no, he really means that. He really does want me to read his mind. And I feel like today, like in our TC rooms, I do. I know exactly like what his treatment plan is going to be. Like for the most part, there's maybe about like less than 5% that I'm like maybe questioning, or maybe he'll go rogue on me when he comes in and I'll be like, and he'll say, I'm sorry, I totally did that different after I met the patient. And I'm like, it's like, that's okay. But that's how we just roll with it. But we knew how we wanted things to look. I knew what he wanted, and I knew what he wanted for a feel for the office. And so I knew how to emulate that in my consultations because I knew what he wanted it to look like because I knew him so well. By the time we started really seeing patients, I knew how he wanted me to address the patients. And so now as I grew in learning the ortho, like I can diagnose stuff now because he taught me, but I also know how he wants me to like treat the patients and how he wants. So he trusts me enough to be able to just go in there and do it because he knows that I'm going to do it just like he would.
Yeah. And you know what I say a lot of times with doctors, and I'm sure a lot of them that are listening now, is it's hard to believe this is like that dance, that really beautiful dance that you get between that partnership that happens between a TC and a doctor. And when you guys are really connecting and you are, we'll use the hot word vibing, where you are just, you're on the same level. I used to say that as a treatment coordinator, I could definitely felt like I could read the mind of my docs. I knew what they were going to say. I could tell by the way they looked at an x-ray to what they were keying in on to know, okay, I know the direction of this. And one of the things that I love about what you're saying, and docs and team members, what I want you to hear out there is, I think so many times, especially as young doctors, you think that, gosh, if I open up a practice, that means that I have to have a super experienced employee in order
Mhm.
to be successful. And one of the reasons, Michelle, I wanted you on is because we did take you as somebody who had good skills and
Right,
had experience, but none of that was directly related to ortho. And I really
right,
feel like the misconception is that we can only be successful if we hire from within our industry. And because we spend, gosh, a majority of our time working with clients and training brand new team members that have never been in our industry, I think,
right.
having you on and being able to talk about that, really what I'm hoping everybody takes away is experience doesn't necessarily mean success
True.
in a practice. I think training the right person
Yeah.
and then gaining experience is what equals success. And I'd like for you to talk just a little bit about, I know not even the TC role, but just how it felt, because when you started in the practice, and this is our model, you're not just doing TC, you're
No.
doing, you're wearing all of those hats. And
Yes.
that can feel maybe a bit overwhelming. But I also wonder if, because you didn't know what you didn't know, if maybe also, maybe it wasn't as crazy because you were just like, I have to answer the phones and I have to put in the payments and I have to do the TC. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's honestly like Dr. Gage hiring me is really, this was actually the perfect design for me because just knowing my background, not knowing my background, he actually just had no clue. He hired me because I worked at Starbucks, but not, it's funny because,
Yeah.
and and I was personable, but not going back to what I did, like the job I had previously to being a stay-at-home mom, they literally designed for me because I was so bored all the time. And so they made this financial counselor position for me so that I could just go and do stuff because I kept switching positions because I would do the job and that everybody would want. And then I would be like, I finished it. So now what do you want me to do? I'm like, and everybody else had been working that job for years and years. And I literally would just get it done. And I'd be like, this is driving me crazy. I can't just sit here and do nothing. I have to be up and going and be busy and doing things. So when this job came about and I'm the financial counselor, I'm the TC, I'm the marketing coordinator, I'm
Mhm.
the janitor, like I'm everything. I'm like, this is that's my dream job. So I think it has to be the right person, the right personality that enjoys this kind of job. But I love that because I feel like it made me vested in the
Mhm.
company. So like when I am doing my TC role, it's just I'm doing it for Dr. Gage. I'm doing it for me. I love this company. Like I helped build this company. Like it
Mhm.
means as much to me as it does to him. So like my heart is in it. I have watched it grow from 4 patients to what we are
Yes.
today, which is now I'm seeing like 300 patients in less
Mhm.
than 3 years. So this is like to me, it gives me goosebumps to think about it.
Yeah.
It's so awesome. I'm like, I helped with that. Like it was just amazing to me to watch. Dr. Gage and I look at that and we're like, oh, it's pretty amazing. This is spectacular. Both were like, I don't want to do it again.
Right. Yeah.
I sure loved it. Like it's
Mhm.
been fun. And him and I have definitely grown together through all of this.
I
Yeah.
think the real side of it where like we can get raw and real, were there times where you felt completely overwhelmed, times where you needed a lifeline, and how
Yes.
did you manage those? What did you do? And truly, what did that process look like you? Because now here we are, what, 3 years in, and
Yep.
it has truly been a process, right? So when I
Yes.
used to tell you way back when, layered approach, step by step,
Yes.
just do this piece right now. And maybe a year from now, you're going to understand why you're doing this piece. Like
Right.
now, hindsight, can you look back and see, okay, overwhelmed, the protocol, not overwhelmed and understand? Can you see that now?
Oh, I can. And I have to say, and this is kudos to you guys because you were my lifeline. Like there
Mhm.
was these moments where like here I am, like even though like I'm a perseverance type of person, But you get thrown into an industry where you're just like, okay, so I know nothing about ortho. I know I'm learning all sorts of systems. And
Mhm.
granted, and Rachel, you remember we started with one system, and then about a few months in, we switched systems because we didn't like it. So like we're switching and we're doing all these things, and I'm doing everything. And then we've added and we've just done a lot of different things.
Yes.
And so when you are the only person to go to, there is nobody else. And even though Dr. Gage knows ortho, he doesn't know billing. He doesn't know all these
Mhm.
different things on how to file claims and how to collect the money, like all these different things. Like he just knows he wants it done. So I want to do it, but I'm like, I'm not really sure how to do that part of it. I did medical billing. I didn't do ortho billing.
Yes.
So I understood the concepts. So Rachel was always my go-to, which is why even 3 years later, you guys are still a part of our world because
Yeah.
we understand the value of me still having somebody to reach out to. And even if it's just Rachel, a lot of times it's my cheerleader because I do get really hard on myself. Like I've had some pretty bad months where my numbers weren't as good as I wanted them to be. And I'm just like, oh, I don't know. Or even a lot of times I can tell when Dr. Gage and I are not vibing together, our numbers go down. It's definitely a thing. For the most part, like our numbers are really good. Yeah, I mean,
Well, and
yeah.
I think as far as like your consultant being a cheerleader and in that role, I think a lot of the time the reason why we can be the cheerleader is because we do have that bird's eye view. We have that
Yeah.
bigger perspective and just I know there were many conversations with you guys where it's like, oh, but our numbers, and I'm like, no, you guys are doing great. And I think that's so hard in startups and for newer
Yes.
team members to see that bigger picture. And so I think that is the great piece about it. And it's one of the things I love about it because then I can step in with you and say, okay, now let's really dissect this month. Let's
Mhm.
talk
Yeah.
about these numbers. Let's
Yeah.
pull them apart. Let's talk about, let's say you're in your second year. Let's talk about where you were last year this time.
Yeah.
Look where you are now. Let's talk through maybe exams that didn't start treatment compared to the ones that didn't start last year. I think it is good on in that area, that piece for sure, to have somebody that's
Yes.
you guys are killing it. Like you're smashing these goals. Don't be caught up in just this one little piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Always did great with that.
Well, one of the things that has helped us so much, because like in the beginning, we were so like desperate for starts and for
Mhm.
patients
Mhm.
that we were just like doing anything to start in. And I loved Rachel's quote, and I still quote it now: is butts in the chair don't equal dollars in the bank. And now we're like,
Wonder where I got that from.
I know. So we're still like dealing with some of those patients that we were eager to start, and we're like, oh, but those are the butts in the chair that they're just like we're throwing those dollars out the window. We're like, how do we get them out of our chair?
Yeah, yeah. And
So
that's and unfortunately that is these are all the learning curves from doctors to new team
mhm,
members. And those
yeah,
first years, everybody's heard me say it over and over again. If you've heard me speak, year one is hard and year
yeah,
one is important. Year two is the most important year in
yeah,
any orthodontic startup practice. The numbers and what you do, that foundation that you put in place in year one, everything comes to fruition year two
yeah,
because all those systems that we worked on, working on tracking where patients, how they're starting, why your conversions are important, how you're connecting with patients and the way they interact from a new patient contact to how they get into your practice. You don't, I always say, like in the beginning, especially as new team members, I feel everybody is, even doctors included, head down, one foot in front of the other. I'm doing the process. And
right,
as you get into year two, it's, oh, wow, I understand the why of
right,
why I'm doing the process. Because if I miss step one, two, and three, shoot, when I go to send out my letters and I forgot to ask who the referral was, or when I'm doing my state of the office address a year later and I'm going back saying, hey, looking at my marketing dollars and what paid off and what do I invest in the next year, and you don't have the data because you didn't take the time because the system wasn't in place, like, and
yeah,
then that compounds and this, and then
yeah,
going into
hmm,
year three, it compounds even more, right? Because
yep,
we just doubled what we did year one, year two, and now we're going for even bigger and loftier goals. So I,
exactly,
I love that, just your perspective and what you have taken away from that. I'm also a little bit curious because one of the things that I push a lot with my startup doctors and team members, and a lot of times, again, team members are along for the ride. They're not dictating treatment, But I always say there is never a better time to implement technology than when you're slow. And in a
True.
startup practice, guess what? You're slow. And it almost seems counterintuitive, right? To be like, gosh, we're using this remote monitoring system and we've
Yeah,
got all these different treatment modalities. And can't we just streamline and do one or two things?
right,
But the reality of it is, if we can get our systems in place in the beginning, it's
right.
so much easier year 2, year 3. And I'd love for you to talk about that because Dr. Gage has always been very progressive with
Yes,
technology. We
yes,
started from the beginning saying we're not going to be overstaffed. We're going to be very smart about the
yep,
way we do the technology we use and the way we progress patients through treatment. So can you
mhm,
talk a little bit as an employee? Not only are
yeah,
you learning all of these new skill sets,
right,
oh, you're learning all of these technology modalities
yeah.
and systems. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I want to touch on a couple points there because I think they come together very much for our philosophy of treatment and our philosophy as an office overall. And because you touched on the point that Dr. Gage said we don't want to be heavily staffed. And that does play into it very
Mhm.
heavily why we do a lot of the things that we do. And so the technology piece, I'm not a huge techie person. So like the fact that I do end up, but I am pretty good at just, like I said, persevering. So I will
Mhm.
figure things out if I need to. It can be interesting. We have issues sometimes where we're like, how do we get this done? Like right now, we've been like a toner issue and it's just going through back and forth. Oh, between Dr. Gage and I, we're like, okay. But yeah, but the technology pieces really plays into our philosophy of
Mhm.
how we want to act as an office, but how we want our patients to feel when they come into our office, which is we don't want them to feel like they're coming into an office that is they are just a number and they're just shuffled through.
Yes.
We have this feeling of camaraderie, of family, of you're here and we are going to love you up. And that is the
Mhm.
kind of feeling that you get when you walk into our office is that this is a place that everybody is welcome and they just feel like
Mhm.
they're just at home here. And so the technology piece, although it is maybe seems like you said, counterintuitive,
Mhm.
we did work really hard in finding all the little pieces that went to that. And so that is it as a TC has been a huge selling point because we use one of the top technology brackets, right? We're using
Mhm.
Damon. And so a lot of times that means that they're not coming in as often for treatment,
Mhm.
or we're using aligners. So they're not coming in as often as treatment. But with the dental monitoring, when we use Grin, it's but we my whole selling point is that but we really want to be in touch with you more often. So then we're using this
Yes.
so that we can have that you can have access to us 24/7. There's
Yeah,
somebody.
leveraging their
Yes,
time. Yes.
exactly. So that you're not going to be missing school, you're not going to be missing
Mhm.
work as often, but you still have like this ability to contact us when it's necessary for you, even at the middle of the night. And then somebody's
Mhm.
going to be back to you really soon, like within 24 hours. So
Yeah.
if I said, even people when they're on vacation, maybe something happened and you have a broken bracket or you have a pokey wire and then you can't come in. I said, we can help you with that
Yes.
remotely. And these are amazing things that you couldn't do before. So that's how our technology has really helped. And even with our custom 3D printed expanders, like that's a technology nobody else in the area uses. And it's what a difference that is for our children that they don't have to have these spacers that are like going up into their gums and like they have all these food restrictions and they're painful and they're all these things.
Yeah.
No, this is a huge selling point. This is how we are different. And even with
Mhm.
the recession and where things have been challenging for us, like year two was like that challenging point where kind of our numbers were going down and we're like, and so a lot of the selling points were like change your services, right?
Yep.
Offer less and have a little more limited treatment. And Dr. Gage is really against that. That's
Mm.
not his MO. He's like, no, I really value what I
Mhm.
offer. And he goes,
Mhm.
and he knows that like this is who I am. So it's like, how can we still give what we offer, but maybe still make it affordable for people.
Yeah.
We looked at other avenues. And so that's
Mhm.
our selling point too, right? Like we still want you to have the very best treatment, but we'll make it affordable for you by having a lower down payment and extend your monthly payment so that we have those options for you. And that's how we have integrated that technology. As far as learning that the technology pieces, I guess I have a personality where I just dig in and learn it.
More of
I
you
Oh,
out
you
there.
just sold me. Okay, where do I sign? I want to be in your office. Where do I sign? heart is ready to burst as I watch, because I think this is something so important, Jill, for our doctors to hear and see. We are talking to a team member that has been in our industry for 3 years. We're not talking to somebody with 20 years experience. And what your elevator speech that you just gave, or your sales pitch that you just gave, shows that you are completely bought in to your doctor and to your practice and to your technology and what you have to offer. And that piece right there is what makes you, Michelle, so good at what you do. Like, I have chills as I'm sitting here.
Thank you.
You are so good at that. And I think that the technology, it's important, but not only is it important, this is the key thing for your practice. It's important because you are bought into it and you understand how it's a value add for your patients.
It is. And and I have to say, for the doctors, one of the things about Dr. Gage that makes what I do possible is that he has created an environment for us to fail. And I think if that wasn't possible, I wouldn't be here. But he models growth and he models humility in such a way that none of us feel like we're going to be chastised if we fail, but we feel like we're actually encouraged to reach out and to fail. And believe me, I have failed a lot. I make many mistakes, but one of the things that I know is that he will never throw me under the bus, and he will always have my back 1,000,000%. And that he will always, sometimes we can butt heads because we have very similar personalities, but for the most, he will always have my back, like 1,000,000%.
Which gives you confidence, right, Michelle? Like, it makes you feel like I can step into this TC room, I can step into a role as a financial coordinator, and I can present what I know he will stand behind. And that is confidence that is relayed to a patient without us even realizing it. It's that energy that comes across to them that they're like, they don't question it. They're not uncertain because you are so confident in that space. And I think what gives you, naturally, you are a confident person, but also what gives you that confidence is exactly what you just talked about, is that it's a safe space for you to grow and thrive.
Yeah,
totally.
And I would say to doctors out there listening too, I think that really is the hard part. We are, and you have been in school. It is all about perfection. And a lot of times, especially for so many of my docs that are listening, you've been thinking and envisioning the way this perfect practice is going to happen and the way the perfect patients are going to walk in, and you perfectly convert them and you perfectly bring your treatment to fruition. And the reality of it is, it's really imperfect. It's not perfect. There's a lot of imperfections in the beginning, and it's messy, and it doesn't flow right. But one of my favorite phrases is, I always say, patients don't know what they don't know. So if you and your team are not making a big deal out of something, if your team member doesn't do it exactly right, follow the script, unless you bring it up and make it a big deal, the patient doesn't know what they don't know. If you forgot to take that scan, or, oh shoot, we forgot to take the down payment, don't make a big deal out of it. Call them back later. Hey, it's time to come back in. We need to get that scan. Hey, looks like we're ready to get that down payment, right? Docs, if I could just give you a little bit of advice, and from what Michelle is saying, probably one of the best things that you can do for your team, your new team, is to give room for imperfection, and give yourself room for imperfection, because it is a learning. You can do so much school, and even in your associateship jobs, it is a completely different role when you step into your own practice and you realize the weight of what this is when you take on those loans and you take on all of this. But the weight of, oh my gosh, every single patient, it can almost cause friction because you can put too much into it, where if you just relax, it'll come, it will happen. I tell every single one of my docs, I promise you, it grows. And year after year, it grows.
It's hard to see it in the beginning. And so that's why you guys are so special for us, because we need that to be like, because it's so daunting. And I've walked with Dr. Gage through that, where you do have everything on him, where like every decision, every employee, everything, when you're like, oh man, it's daunting. So it is really helpful to have an outside source to fall back on that just can be again, a cheerleader, but also just to point you in the right direction.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk a little bit, and I know Rachel, we had talked about this a little bit, but and one of the things that I think is good to know going into year 3 is you have grown in, we're going to talk the TC role for a minute.
Sure.
You've really grown in where you start with your conversions to where you're at and then continuing on it. I always tell docs, if we've, in our first year, if our brand new TC has got a 50% conversion ratio, like we're high-fiving. And if it's over 50%, like we're double high-fiving. Like again, being very realistic, right? A brand new TC is not going to start, or a doctor is not going to start at 100% conversion or an 85%. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how your conversions, you followed the exact curve. We know that curve and we know what our TCs should do, but how you have worked as to really pay attention to where your conversions are at. And then maybe some of the tips that you've learned or tricks that you've learned in getting patients to say yes to treatment. Because I think that's what everybody who's listening is always looking for. Ooh, is there some magical something? The reality of it is no. But I do think that there are certain patterns that we can watch for or be aware of. So can you talk a little bit to what has helped with your success in the TC room?
Sure. I think like the biggest success, I think, is setting people up to start. And so is like right from the very first phone call, right? Letting them know. And we're battling with that a little bit now because we've added so many employees and I'm not always the one taking the phone call. But like it's but letting them know, okay, when you come in, we're gonna take new photos and x-rays. And if you're ready to start, we can get you started that day for as little as $250 down. And I'm gonna let you know how that's gonna happen. And we can get you scheduled that day, or we can start you that day, those kinds of things, and let them know right then that we're getting ready for that start. So that's part of that role. And then again, going back to what I touched on earlier, is our philosophy is like they're a part of us. Like they're gonna feel like they're our best friend, right? They're our family. So, and this is partially just my personality, but I think anybody can do this, is find something that you relate with that patient, make them feel welcome, right? Connect with them. You have on that phone call, when they come into your office, make that connection. And like I said, I know I just do it naturally, but I know that, so sometimes people need to have that trained, but get to know them, be there. Like when they walk out of here, that like some of our reviews have been like, oh man, I just feel like they were my best friend. Like they just knew me. They wanted to be my people. Those people don't want to leave and come back. The ones that don't start, they're the ones like Dr. Gage and I've now come into, like, again, with what Rachel said, butts in the chair don't equal dollars in the bank. And we're like no longer chasing down starts like we once were, because our conversion rate is really high. But like we are realizing that the ones that are just price shopping, only looking for the lowest fee, that kind of thing, we're like, those are not our people. And so I'm not going to spend as much time following up with them. In the beginning, I followed up with everybody. Like I hunted them down. Like, you know, like Rachel said, you hunt them down till they basically tell you where to go with that. And that's what I did. I was like, hello, this is Michelle again. You know, like, and so like now I don't have the time to do that as much. So I'm really like, I don't like those same day starts are so important. So I really want to set myself up for success. So even like to the point where if I know somebody like is going to be like, oh, you're going to come in, hey, oh, like your daughter's already in treatment. Yeah, can we get Tyler? And he wants to come in, because I was like, oh, are you guys going to start him right away? Oh, well, we're probably not going to start him until next year. Well, let's just get him scheduled. Let's just wait and do that consult next year when you're going to start him. Because then I don't have to follow up with them 50 times until then. So then we're not saying, oh, we're going to start, like that kind of thing. So it's like asking some of those questions, getting to know when those are, so that I'm setting myself up. So I'm not just scheduling a bunch of consults of people who aren't going to start for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. And a lot of it's just asking questions, getting to know that person. Where are they at? What are their thoughts? Why are you coming in? And sometimes it's just finding out, getting to know the person.
Yeah.
Michelle,
so I don't know if that's a good tip.
Thought about, so do you remember my very first office visit and the flow of the new patient exam at that first office visit versus the flow of the new patient exam now?
Must we talk about that?
But do you remember me telling you, and I don't know if you remember, but I remember at that point, because you were just frustrated, and we're trying to get timing down and trying to figure out what is the best fit for your practice. And I'm like, Michelle, I promise you, you are going to get there. You guys are going to figure out a flow that works for you, and you're going to get there. And I think that, like, in the TC room itself, and as far as Jill's speaking, like conversion even, that is such a differentiator, right? When you have that comfortable flow, when you know exactly what to expect. The chemistry with the doctor obviously is one of the most important pieces, but you can have chemistry with the doctor and your exam is, what am I doing?
Yeah,
but when you have that flow, and I don't know, while you were speaking now, I'm like thinking back to, man, that first office visit versus my last one watching you, it was like night and day. And your conversion is night and day. So I think that's probably a piece of it too, right? It's just, what does that look like? What can I expect at minute 5 of the exam? What can I expect at minute 10? I feel like you just know now. You're at the point where you just know, whereas in the beginning, there's a learning curve, right?
Absolutely.
We're not out the gate swinging with the flow of our new patient exam. There is a learning curve, and we have to customize it to the chemistry of that practice.
Yes.
Yep, for sure. Definitely. Both Dr. Gage and I have understand ourselves. Like we've talked about, like even like potential growth in our industry, like in our office, if we add down the road another TC, we both realize that we function very similar to each other. We both are the fly by the seat of our pants kind of people. So it makes things really flow well with us too. But he said, we definitely cannot hire a third person just like us, because that would be a disaster. Like we have to have that third person has to be more organized and more not so flighty, because like we really work well in that, right? But we just need somebody so whenever we hire like that receptionist, our receptionist or the front person always has to be a little bit more low key than we are, if that makes sense. So like we always end up having that balance.
Yeah. But I think what you guys are starting to recognize, and this is, for any of the docs listening, this is really common year 3 to 5, is that what you start to see is we start off, and especially if you're working with us, or we're giving you the foundation.
Yeah.
We've got 1 or 2 team members that are doing everything. And as you grow, it becomes very important that the new team members that are being brought on each know their positions, know what they're accountable for, because you can't continue to have everybody doing everything.
No.
It just, that becomes chaos, and nobody wants chaos in their practice. Right?
Exactly.
It's just the evolution of year 1 to 3, year 3 to 5, year 5 to 8, and on. And so
cool. It's fun.
Yeah.
Fun.
So as we're finishing up here and just finishing up some of our questions, and one of the things that I'm curious about is any tips, or if we've got new TCs listening, or doctors that are listening, tips that you want to give doctors or TCs that made your transition into the practice a success. Like, what are some things that you would say, hey, you can pay attention to this, or you'd be looking at this going in?
Really trust the process, I guess, is important. Again, and just, I guess I said before too, is be willing to fail and then just get back up and have grace with yourself. Because I think it's really easy to get really depressed about like the position that you're in, and to feel like I'm just not succeeding and I'm not doing a well enough job. And you could easily get stuck in that and just want to give up. And so it's really important to just keep moving forward and just trust the process and know that you're in a good place and it's going to get better. And now, like seeing where we're at today, I could have never envisioned that we would get to this point 3 years ago. It's just unimaginable. So I guess trust the process and just keep doing what you guys tell us to do. Just keep doing the next steps, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That is my favorite phrase. I say that all the time. Rachel hears me, my team hears me say it. The docs will just trust the process. If they will just trust what we're teaching them. I've been doing this a long time. A lot of thought went into the processes that we have. If you just trust it.
It works.
Yeah.
It really does work.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, it works. It works.
It really does. We're definitely proof of it. We're growing and we're succeeding, and it's amazing. It's crazy. I love to see it.
Yeah. Well, this is great. Michelle, as we finish up, and Rachel, I'll throw this out to you too. Anything else that you think we need to cover? This has been fantastic. And I just
thank you.
cannot thank you enough for giving your perspective as a new team member, as a somebody coming in. We talk a lot with docs and whatnot, but I think it's important for docs to hear that we don't have to have employees that have been doing this forever in our practice. And a lot of times we have team members that are more bought out when they're brand new than we do where team members are coming in and dragging along the past of the previous doctor or doctors that they worked with.
Yep. That's Dr. Gage's philosophy. And I will say we only have one of our team members that has any ortho experience. Otherwise, every one of us have zero ortho experience. So and the one that had ortho experience, she hadn't worked in the ortho for a while. But yeah, we're all pretty much new to ortho. And so we just all get on the job training and we do it. So it works really well for us here. But again, the doctor has to be willing to do some of that training as well. And so there is some growth in that part of it too, but that you have to go through. So there's good and bad to everything. You have, like you say, you mentioned the baggage of the past, and that's one of the things that we don't want to carry into as well. So we really only hire people based on personality and characteristics that we want to emulate our philosophy. And and if they don't emulate that, then we don't keep them, because we are very closed onto this is who we are. And so if this is not going to be who you are, then you don't belong here. So we're just really big on that, because that's just who we are. And that's our biggest selling point.
Yeah, you can tell for sure. You can see that in the practice. This has been great. And I'm just going to thank you again for being on Hey Docs. And I know this is a big step, taking time out of your day to do this and talk about your journey in these last 3 years. So the way I like to finish up Hey Docs is I always like to finish with the speed round. Are you ready to do the speed round?
I guess so, yes.
All right. How about describe your style in one word? What was that?
Outgoing.
Oh, I love that. I love it. Okay. Anything you're listening to or watching right now?
I listen to murder mystery podcasts.
Ooh. I have a
true crime.
True crime. I was just gonna say I know a couple others that listen to those too. That's funny. What do you do just for you?
Karate.
Ooh, nice. What belt? What belt?
Brown. I'm almost black belt.
That's exciting.
It is. I know. That's my goal.
Oh, that's cool. Any hidden talents?
Karate.
Yes. Hey, that's a good one.
I'm a drawer and a writer.
Nice. Perfect. And then to finish it up, any big, hairy, audacious goals that you have for yourself?
Yes, I'm going to write a book.
I love it. I love it. You will do it. Just keep, like me in my 30 years, I set my goals, and it doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight, but if you set your goal to it, it will happen. Yep. So
I believe it. Yes.
You'll have to let us know when that book comes out.
I will. You guys got to be my first people to buy it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'll give you a signed copy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Rachel, thank you for co-hosting today with me. I really appreciate having both of you on, and I'm so excited. And I know that we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you guys for all you do. You guys have been my lifeline, and I'm very grateful for you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle.
Bye.
Bye.